start my program, my 4-week program on the work I've been doing on my doctorate. And so come and listen and we'll talk about some debt. All right.
Well, and we're following monsters with debt.
Debt.
So, hey, does that go up more, or is that okay? Well, while he's doing that, this week in FCC Trivia, in what year did Promised Land Preschool first open? Does anybody have a guess? 2007? Any other guess? 2008? Linda wins. Get something from the treasure box? Promised Land Preschool has been here in the facility since 2008. We were talking this week about the gift that several of our teachers have been here for a long time, a couple even since the beginning. We've had, I don't know how many kids have gone through this program in the last 10 years, but dozens and dozens and dozens. So if you don't know much about Promised Land Preschool, raise your hand if you're on the board of Promised Land Preschool. These ladies would be happy to answer some questions, and it really is a blessing to have these kids here during the day and to be able to serve the community in this way, because it really is a necessary thing that we do in the community. So, that is your FCC trivia. Tonight we are going to be wrapping up our study about monsters with Frankenstein. And some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight actually overlap with some of the things we talked about in the first week about witches. So just to do a little bit of recap, and then if you had any questions or thoughts that have come up as you've been thinking about some of these things the last couple of weeks, or if you weren't here. The first week we talked about witches and the way that even in modern media we portray people as being witches, and the way the portrayal of witches can feed into harmful stereotypes about different women or people who are Jewish or those kinds of things. We talked about the idea of Unheimlich, which is that really unsettling feeling when something that should be comforting, should be home-like, should be warm, should be good, isn't. And then last week we talked about Satan and what role Satan and evil and temptation and even sin play today, and the way we think about and conceptualize Satan today, as opposed to the way Genesis or Job or Mark or other periods throughout biblical history and just the history of civilization have thought about Satan and evil. So with that said, I know this is kind of a different kind of topic than we often talk about at TGIW. So I wanted to take a minute and just check in and see if over the last couple of weeks, as you've been paying attention to some of these things, as you've been reading the news and watching TV and that kind of thing, or if you've had any other thoughts or questions that have come up about these topics the last couple of weeks. All right. Then we'll move on. So at your table, every table has a piece of paper and some crayons. So talk amongst yourselves at your table and draw Frankenstein. Whatever that looks like. When you think of Frankenstein, last week I showed you images of Satan. This week I'm making you use the word. So when you think of Frankenstein, what do you think of? Draw it.
Brown and purple.
Did you notice how she just picked that up? Here it is. You can take that out.
Not really. I tried to. I just not really very much about it. You knew about that. Does he have two teeth you can run, or big teeth there?
The what?
I'm probably gonna go werewolf or something.
Like the big
Monster's monster, yeah.
It was a comedy.
Dr. Frankenstein is a funny one. I think it's tall.
I like this cooperative learning.
Oh, okay. I got seen it. Does it look the same day
It's time to show off. Let's show our Frankenstein. Oh, you're not done. Sorry.
Pass him up.
He's done.
That's good. Yeah.
This is good. Ramsey's good.
Artist in our Good.
All right, yeah.
Where's yours?
That sucker scared me to death when I was a kid. I used to see
That's
it.
nice.
So the McNutt family has a different kind of interpretation. Steve, would you tell everybody why your Frankenstein looks like that?
Alright, so I did this Frankenstein here. It's a replication of Eddie Van Halen's guitar.
Oh.
And the nickname for his guitar is Frankenstein because he used multiple different pieces of different guitars to build one.
Clever. Would any other groups like to show off?
Yeah, soccer.
So we have here, Jim and Bill have a Frankenstein that has bolts in his neck.
Yes.
Scar on his cheek.
We got balls.
You got bolts?
We got balls.
Okay. What else what are some other characteristics of your
Well,
Frankenstein?
it's got a scar down here where he's opened up to put his heart in, I guess.
Flat head.
Take it out.
Yeah, he's got a flat head. Oh, my God.
Anybody else want to share your Frankenstein?
They don't need to say that.
Okay. Here's a nail through his head, spiky hair, and green hair. Oh, sorry. Anybody else want to share? So we're going to take actually a few minutes and watch. So I selected this one, which is not the most interesting retelling of Shelley's Frankenstein, but the very well done ones were like 25 minutes long. So I decided not to show one of those. Did anybody at your table note that Frankenstein was the scientist and not the creature?
It was
Did
Dr.
you know that
Yes.
Frankenstein?
Dr. Frankenstein.
Dr. Frankenstein. So Frankenstein is not the monster.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll tell you, when I read this book, I got halfway through it and I kept thinking, so when is he going to turn into the monster? And I finally had to Google it and realize that this image that we have of Frankenstein, it's called that because that's the name of the doctor, not the name of the creature. Now, I will say that in this summary, they use the word monster, but it's also interesting that in the book, the creature is called that, the creature. Never called a monster, doesn't have green skin, has kind of a yellowish hue to his skin. So we're going to watch this, and as you watch this, think about the things that are surprising to you about, compared to the way you heard Frankenstein talk about. Does this not work? No. I thought I did it right this way. This time. Oh.
Chasing the first one. This man is almost dead from exhaustion and exposure, so they take him aboard. The man is Victor Frankenstein. Walton becomes friends with him, and while Frankenstein is recovering, he tells Walton his story. Frankenstein grew up in Geneva. His father had been an important figure in the government, and they were well off. He grew up with his cousin, Elizabeth, whom his parents expected him to marry eventually. He had a little brother named William. He had a best friend named Henry Clerval. Frankenstein goes to a famous university in Ingolstadt, where he becomes very good at science. He figures out scientifically how to bring something to life, though he doesn't tell us what the secret is. He makes a creature using parts from a graveyard. On a rainy night in November, he brings it to life, but he's so horrified by it that he runs away. The next day, his friend Clerval arrives at the university to begin his studies, but Frankenstein becomes ill, and Clerval spends all winter nursing him. Just as he's getting better at the beginning of spring, he gets a letter telling him that his little brother, William, has been murdered. Justine, a servant in his house whom everyone always liked, has been arrested because William had been carrying a locket that was found on her. So Frankenstein heads home. Just before he gets home, he sees the monster from a distance, and he knows that the monster killed his brother. Frankenstein watches Justine's trial, and his cousin, Elizabeth, testifies that she's too nice to have done this, but she's convicted and sentenced to death. Frankenstein has to watch her die. Frankenstein goes with his family on a sightseeing trip, and one day, when he goes mountain climbing by himself, the monster appears to him and makes him sit down and listen to his story. Frankenstein would rather kill him, but he listens. The monster describes how he came to life completely disoriented. He didn't know how to speak or understand language, and he had to get used to the feel of his own body and to figure out basic concepts like light and dark, heat and cold, and hunger and thirst. He eventually wandered out into the forest, where he could hide and look for berries and nuts. The first human he sees is an old man in a hut, who runs away in terror because the monster is so hideous. He's fascinated by the first village he walks into, but the residents are terrified, and they drive him off by throwing things at him. He finally finds shelter in this little shed built up against the side of a cottage. He can look through a crack and observe the people who live there, but they don't know he's there. These people are called the DeLacys, a brother and sister named Felix and Agatha, and their blind old father, who plays the guitar. The creature sees how much they love each other, and he wants to be like them. He starts learning language by listening to them speak French. One day, an Arabian woman named Saifi arrives. Saifi doesn't speak English or know much about European culture, so Felix teaches her everything from vocabulary and reading to history, and the monster learns along with her. He learns to read and write, and about good and evil, and about the history of human societies. In the woods, he finds 3 books: Paradise Lost, The Sorrows of Young Werther, and Plutarch's Lives, and he reads the papers that were in Frankenstein's dressing gown, which reveal who Frankenstein is, where he lives, and how he came to make the monster. The monster starts to hate Frankenstein for giving him such an awful, lonely existence and abandoning him, since he's too ugly to make friends with anyone. Eventually, the monster learns the story of these people. The DeLacys were a rich family in Paris, but Felix helped a wealthy Turk escape from prison because he felt sorry for him. So the government took the DeLacy family's money and banished them, and they went to live in the cottage. The Turk did escape from prison, but he abandoned Felix afterward. But the Turk's daughter, Saifi, had fallen in love with Felix, so she escaped to come marry him. The monster wants to be friends with the DeLacys, and he decides that if he goes to talk to the old man first, the old man will listen because he's blind. When the others leave, he pretends to be a traveler and speaks to DeLacy, and it's going okay until Felix and Agatha and Saifi come back. The women are horrified, and Felix drives the monster off with a stick. At first, the monster goes out into the woods and decides that he's going to declare war on humans. But in the morning, he cools down and decides to go back and try again. But he finds Felix giving up the lease, and he never sees the DeLacys again, which makes him feel doubly rejected. He comes back at night and destroys the cottage. Then he starts the long walk to Geneva to try to find his creator. He gets shot while he's on his way there, just because he stops to help a woman who's drowning. When he gets to Geneva, he grabs this little boy, thinking that he could use the boy to learn his way around. But when the boy mentions his father's name is Frankenstein, the monster kills him to get revenge on Frankenstein. You might notice that there's an inconsistency in the story here, because Victor made the creature in November, then got sick all winter. William got killed the following spring, maybe 6 months later. But the creature spends a whole year at the cottage, and he kills William more like 18 months after being created. So there's a difference of a year between the 2 stories. Just to be even more hateful, he puts the locket William was carrying in Justine's pocket, knowing she'll be condemned for murder. The monster insists that Frankenstein made a female as ugly as he is, so he'll have a companion. He promises to go away with her to South America, and threatens to kill lots of people if Frankenstein won't do it, so Frankenstein agrees. Frankenstein decides to go on a long trip and work on the new monster away from home, so he and Clerval go on a long sightseeing trip through Germany, England, and Scotland. He eventually rents a little cottage on a remote island in Scotland to do the work. But he gets disgusted and destroys the new creature before it's finished. The monster comes in to find out what he's doing, and is furious that Frankenstein broke his promise. The monster swears he'll get revenge, and says, "I'll be with you on your wedding night." Frankenstein takes all the parts and puts them in a basket, then sails out in a boat at night and dumps it all. Then he goes to sleep in the boat. When he comes ashore, he's in Ireland, and the people arrest him. It turns out someone strangled his friend, Clerval, and they think Frankenstein did it. He gets sick again, because he's so upset that the monster killed another of his friends, and a magistrate has him nursed back to health. He's eventually released, since he didn't kill Clerval. He goes back home, and he marries Elizabeth, like they've been planning their whole lives. He thinks the monster is planning to kill him on his wedding night, so he sits up waiting with a gun, but the monster actually kills Elizabeth. His father dies of grief soon afterward, so Victor has lost everybody. He devotes his life to finding the monster and destroying it, but the monster keeps going farther and farther north, until they're chasing each other on dog sleds far out to sea. After he tells Walton the whole story, he dies. The monster comes on board the boat to pay a final farewell to Frankenstein. He tells Walton he's going to set himself on fire and destroy himself, because he didn't mean to be bad. Walton winds up taking the ship back home, partly because the crew makes him, and partly because Frankenstein's story shows that scientific discovery isn't worth sacrificing your life for. One of the major questions of the book is how much we should blame Frankenstein for what happens, and how much the monster. Critics like to point out all the things that are wrong with Frankenstein, because he was irresponsible and created this monster for no good reason. Then he abandoned his creation, instead of helping it, and he was very careless about protecting his friends. Readers tend to see the monster as more at fault, though, because even though he gets a lot of bad breaks, being frighteningly ugly and misunderstood, his decision to kill a child is just evil, and he keeps killing people out of spite, or for revenge. Another question is whether the creature is naturally good, like he claims to be, and what it is that makes him become evil, his own choices or things that happen to him. For more information about Frankenstein, check out the Frankenstein Spark Note on sparknotes.com.
He didn't look like yours. Stuff in his neck.
So after having watched that, is the Spark version of the story, how does that change the way you would draw the picture? Or would it change the way you draw the picture?
He was made in parts.
It was made with parts. Yes, remember.
He wasn't.
No, he wasn't good. I didn't.
It wasn't green, didn't have bolts, yeah. He did, he wore a robe the whole time. But he took, it was Frankenstein's robe, yeah. So, here's a couple of questions. You can get back with your small groups. And the narrator talks about this a little bit at the end. So, explore this. Who is the monster? Is the monster Frankenstein, the scientist, who, and of course it doesn't go into all of the specifics in this video, but he essentially just was really interested in the science of it. So he did this, he created this creature for no real specific reason, and then when the creature came to life, Frankenstein ran out and abandoned him. So that much of the book is actually the creature and the creator having this conversation where the creature actually feels abandoned, feels like you made me this way and then you abandoned me. And all he wanted was beauty, and he wanted relationships. He saw this family and he wanted relationships, but he couldn't have it because of the way he looked. But, as it points out, he also did make bad choices. So get back together in your groups and talk about who was more monstrous, the creature or the creator, and why. And what makes the creature evil? Was it his own choices, or was it his circumstances that led him to that? And of course, we know that there aren't easy answers to these. So explore some of your ideas around these questions together.
Well, the way they tell it, the monsters and Frankenstein. No. You do remember a story? Yeah. But do you remember one?
Yeah.
You do?
I remember the story. I remember the plot.
Oh. He was a doctor. Yeah.
Interesting thing, the original story is
That sounds familiar.
that the creature
Yeah.
takes his anger out,
That sounds
not on
familiar.
Dr. Frankenstein,
But he did
where
create a
they got
creature.
him in that shape, but on other people. Yeah. That really makes sense. And his threats are not to harm Dr. Frankenstein, to kill a lot of other people. Sort of like a Las Vegas situation, and your anger just kill everybody.
Was he out to Frankenstein? Yeah, I remember the Lexington part. And having a buddy.
So was it evil because of
Turn the sound off.
he had that cheek?
It's mute, and it's not near as exciting, or whatever.
Don't get any part of it.
It's
I
true.
remember as a child seeing it.
Well,
It was really scary.
Well, the way this one goes, you feel like the monsters were Frankenstein.
Soul, they showed the old Kentucky kid.
Creature was his own thing. He wanted
I didn't think he knew anything.
just a creature.
Actually,
I don't remember him actually killing him.
this guy, this is the brother
You know,
section.
back in this day, they didn't show stuff on movies like we
He
do.
mostly just walked around and scared people.
Yeah.
He would have if he could have. He could have.
Me being a kid.
A successful life.
Very successful.
So-and-so's not there now.
There was probably a silent version of it.
It would be interesting to see what this
Were his hands out in front? No, but I mean, there was probably a version like that. Were his hands out in front? That's what I was thinking. Sharks like this that goes around.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Trying to get a balance.
He's always stiff-legged and moves like
So,
this.
hocus pocus.
This thing here, I've never seen him.
Maybe that's a European version.
So,
Because they had France and Germany and all that.
you could argue both sides.
Lexington, England. And why that stood out in my
I mean,
mind.
it explains a lot of things.
Yeah. School.
Kentucky. Yeah.
Well, I'm sitting there thinking,
I keep saying Peter Boyd and
we just messed it up. We don't know how to do it.
I was looking all around.
Wait, not Frankenstein.
Swear I saw this.
Oh, it's the big city of Frankenstein's here somewhere.
We don't live in a big old house about like that.
Why not make, yeah, why not make
I was always watching, I was watching everything.
it? We make it.
like in the older section near the campus, the football stadium in that area. So
Similar to this, in that there's
right in there somewhere. His walking stuff. We bought it. I'm not a big fan of like Sherlock Holmes. They always have a side. They got somebody with anyway. And I don't know, the doctor or whoever, the investigator's got a side thing.
Anyway, he found his first group and how all the
Somebody.
in the movie,
Really? I remember hearing about
but he because of his face, and he had
everybody that came
ten
up.
certain.
So what do you think? Who is the monster? Who is more monstrous? Equally monstrous? Would you say more about them?
Yeah.
What makes you say that?
Dr. Frankenstein didn't take responsibility for what they had done. He created them and then he got, oh no, we're gonna abandon him, so.
And did you catch what happened when, so because the creature didn't have any relationship, everybody was scared of him, what did he want? To be loved. So what did he ask Dr. Frankenstein to do? Create a name. You sent some names here. And then, oh, go ahead, Dr.
One of the curious things to me is the fact that the creature took his anger out on other people, not on Dr. Frankenstein. He never threatened him, he threatened other people and killed other people.
Yeah,
They
that's
were all,
true.
but they were all people that met Frankenstein, which is really more cruel than
But
killing him.
it's sort of like the shooter in Las Vegas. He took his anger out on people he didn't even know.
Yeah. And I think that that's true a lot of times with a lot of the evil things that happen, is that innocent people pay the price. If people who are involved in it, they pay the price for the decisions that the people who have the ability, they have the power, either, so the creature was like 8 feet tall, was stronger than everybody, was faster than everybody, physically was like the most powerful, not human, but based on a human being ever. He had physical power to do anything, but what he didn't have was that relationship, and so what he took from the Creator was the relationship. He feared, could you say more about that? Why did he fear the Creator?
Because if he can build me, he can take me away.
That's true. You can build me, you can take me away. Did you ever find yourself feeling pity for the creature as you were watching that? Some.
When he's looking in the face.
Until he killed the little girl. So that kind of brings us to the second question. Was he evil, or were his bad decisions a result of the life that he had lived, or somewhere in the middle of those? Maybe it's not an either or. Yes? Go ahead. How so?
Well, like the rest of us, he couldn't help what his environment was originally. He made good choices, but he had to feel a little sorry for him. Because if he hadn't been created to start with, he wouldn't have been faced with having to make those choices.
It reminds me of some of the things that we are starting to know about cyclical generational incarceration and generational poverty and some of those things. That I actually read several years ago, a really interesting piece that they were working in an inner city in one of the boroughs of New York or something, and it was this organization that helped to keep people out of prison, I think, if I remember correctly. But instead, they worked with teen moms. But instead of focusing with the teen moms, instead of putting all of their energy in the teen moms, what they did was they